Hello, San Francisco!
Thor, Tony, check it out. At once.
Try to keep up.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the cinema, Marvel is back, but this time not on the big screen. Well, depending on your TV size anyway, but the smaller set above your console or PC. Thanks to the early access beta this weekend on PS4 and Pro, we get our first look at what Crystal Dynamics have been crafting over the past 3+ years. The Avengers is the modern day equivalent of the 70s and early 80s Star Wars craze. Kind of. But fret not though, as Xbox and PC players get their beta shot next weekend, but today we're going to soar, swing, run and our way through Avengers on PlayStation. Let's drop the hammer. Crystal Dynamics have been around for a long time. Right back with the 32-bits dawn, in fact, they leapt onto the 3DO with its crash and burn title. Luckily, that was not an omen, but their next huge hit was with the seminal Legacy of Kain series that sunk its teeth into the PS1 and later the Dreamcast. Over the years, they have built up quite a portfolio and technology with their games and their own engine. This culminated when they took over from the Lara Croft creators in core design with their Legends entry in 2006. And here they remained and grew the TR series until 2015's Rise, where they harnessed their proprietary Foundation engine to take Lara on her ever grander adventures. But leaving this behind to other studios, their engine and their blessing, they have left in the past that narcissistic serial killing grave robber and moved over to a technology lord narcissistic Iron Man. Anyway, they've teamed up with Eidos Montreal again, along with expanding their team with a second studio, and the exceptional Nixies also returned to deliver the PC and possible announced next-gen free patches that will come around the console's launch. This early beta allows us a glimpse of just how much they have enhanced and improved their engine to carry them over the bookending point of this generation and into the next. Now, the game is a varied selection of single-player story missions taking us through 5 of the Avengers' journey as you battle the repercussions of the A-Day event that exploded in San Francisco, causing devastation and new enemies to overcome. Each of them carries their trademark looks, weapons and combat, from Thor's hammer, Black Widow's kicking and twirling skills to Tony Stark's quips. The opening mission is more of a grand set piece right out of a Hollywood blockbuster with a huge battle across the Golden Gate Bridge. Later missions involve breaking into a secret base with our new superpowered heroine and her hulking sidekick. Combat is similar to God of War in multiple enemies, cannon fodder and meteor baddies. It mixes heavy and light attacks, not a surprise as the epic 2018 God of War combat lead joined Crystal not long after closing out Kratos' epic return. This tight and fluid combat is helped by the wealth of movesets and weapons each of the heroes has. The base attacks are complemented by the 3 superpowers and bolstered even further by a robust skill set expansion for each hero as you unlock greater powers and more moves. Now, these sections could improve on AI techniques and variety, but it's too early and limited a selection of the game here to make a final judgment, other than it is fun and flowing at times with a good variety of combat between the heroes. But I just hope a wider variety of combat, such as the bigger enemies, is utilised in the full game, and they work on that impact and collision with the weaker enemies reacting to your hits. But some of the Hulk battles where you're smacking, even some of the bigger baddies, they just glitch through and take the hit, reducing their energy. I don't like that lack of connection, and that's one of the problems I've got with the combat. It still feels disconnected sometimes in certain fights at certain points. There is a lot of collision, there is a lot of damage, but it could do some tweaks here and there so characters react to you when you hit them, even if it keeps their attack motion going. Just add in a little stagger or sway, just to add in a little bit more weight and contact from the combat. When the Hulk, for one, is swinging his arms around, you expect some kind of reaction from the person on the receiving end.
Kind of word for a grotesque thing like you.
I found the archive schematic. I think I can find my way to you.
Anyway, moving away from the game and into my bread and butter, and that is the game's graphics, engine, construction and resolution and performance. The base is up first here with the base version itself sporting a dynamic resolution buffer. Counts come out more often than not at 1920 by 1080, but I did catch some points dipping to 1536 by 864. It may even go under that. The entire IQ is backed up with a strong temporal accumulation anti-aliasing, which is merged in with a stochastically sampled per object motion blur. Now, due to the dithered patterns on shading and motion, the dip in resolution depth itself is not that noticeable overall, as the image, even when it's at a full 1080p, can be quite noisy. This means the sharp details, the high resolution texture assets and finer, higher frequency elements can get lost at times. Now, because this is such a fast paced and persistent game though, the amount of detail crammed into the frame makes this a minor slight overall, but they really are maximising that GPU budget on what is already an aging console now in the PS4, and it's commendable what they've achieved here. But you can see some of the cutbacks and sacrifices in that image clarity to keep such a high resolution and output at all times, even at 30 FPS. Now, the Pro pack's in two modes, with the higher end 4K mode giving us just that. Again though, dynamic alongside a checkerboard construction. This could mean that the dynamic element is a breakdown from the checkerboard itself, but that's likely not the cause. I counted as low as 2880 by 1620 right up to 3840 by 2160, which does appear to be quite often, but like base, it may even go lower. I just never counted any points where it did. The majority of counts again landed at that 4K checkerboard level, which does help reduce the noise seen in the PS4 image. Assets are cleaner and sharper, with a contrast sharpness added in to resolve and heighten those finer details. The checkerboard sawtooth edges do crop up in stills and zooms, but in motion it is a harder area to pick up on and a worthy trade for the perceived IQ increase. Again, the game is noisy overall, just how they render the frame, the stochastic sampling and all that dithered patterns that they use cross shading itself and motion blur does mean that the checkerboard solution does get lost in the middle of that, and it is a great increase to the image quality overall. But that said, I would love to see what a 2560 by 1440 native image would look like, as it may yet offer a better final image than the Foundation Engine's checkerboard resolve. Now, talking of native, the performance mode, just like Tomb Raider, is indeed a native 1920 by 1080p like the base, but unlike that, it's not dynamic and it appears stable at this resolution. Again, it may dip in extreme areas, but none I have picked up. The reduction in pixel count is obvious, with clothing details, finer elements on oblique surfaces and even filtering all being softer than the 4K mode, but slightly better than the PS4. Not a great shock, with only 25% of the pixel real estate to work with here from that 4K mode. Other than this, both modes and both consoles line up almost perfectly from detail, texture filtering, texture quality and draw distance. There is a difference between the Pro and the base PS4. There's certainly more alpha effects, more particles. Those GPU levels are ramped up slightly on both modes on the Pro than they are on the base PS4, but other than that, everything else is the same. The same shadow cascade tier, and even down to the SSR and the BTAO, that's the broad temporal ambient occlusion. This manifests with errors in the occlusion areas of foreground objects such as Bruce Banner here on the grass, the bricks. You can see those self-shadowed elements all getting wiped away as he moves in front of them and then drawing back in. Because they're temporal and because they're mixed in with that TAA, they stand out even more, certainly on strong elements like this. But in other areas, it's not as bad, and it is a great addition because it does add lots of depth and grounding to the world, make everything look more solid, and I'm a big fan of it. Again, due to the performance gains it offers, most of these effects in the engine are stochastic in their resolve, and the pixel shader itself means that they're cleaned up by that TAA afterwards, and they can stand out more on the base model over Pro due to the resolution difference. As with all games and engines though, everything has a variable level of resolution for the buffers and a 4K mode, and that percentage increase means all these effects such as SSR, ambient occlusion, volumetrics and even texture details all can be improved along with alpha effects due to the increase in resolution, whether that's a 1080p base or a 2160p base.
Hey, where are we anyway? Right, I'm talking to myself. Okay. Show me your secrets.
Character models are excellent throughout. Due to the licensing costs and legislation impact, none of them are modelled or voiced by the movie stars though. We still get the likes of Nolan North for Tony Stark, which is a perfect choice, or Troy Baker for Peter Parker. David Banner. The team that once pushed hair tech forward on Tress effects is now supported by Square and their exquisite Final Fantasy hair, which adorns a great deal of beards and bonces in the game. The obvious fin construction and dithered elements again aside, it works brilliantly to enhance the humanity of the models. Skin is always a vital part to pull off, and this is mapped within the engine's physically based rendering model. The dynamic duos all support impressive real-time subsurface light scatter, with the Hulk being a standout within his half-green, half-flesh tone status. Nice touches across the levels such as caustic reflections on water bodies or shadow casting lights just enhance the great material work evident here. Animation is a bit of a mixed bag though, with some excellent combat moves such as Iron Man's hand cannon blast and turnaround behind his back, to Khan's stretch and pound attacks with hands only Kenny Everett could better. The idle animations of Bruce Banner can look very odd and obviously looped when left, or some lacking run animations in Thor and even the Hulk, which can leave them looking floaty and weightless at times, almost like a moonwalk across the road. This is more a standout though, as the jumps and pounds all carry a great deal of gravity to them over these small inconsistencies. Being a beta though, these could be refined later, more so with the game looking to have a long post-launch lifespan with free updates and new stories added after launch. These may improve in the final code or not long thereafter. Completing such a super powered game is super powers and explosions. Lots and lots of explosions. The engine pushes a great deal of pyrotechnics throughout its render time. Huge alpha blended smoke, fire or collision aware particles are all there to enhance the chaos. Ripping up the floors as the Hulk demonstrates this the most, but destruction and interaction are key. And these are all key areas for the team themselves to have spent a great deal of time on. Barrels roll as you hit them, glasses smash, walls break, and a general level of solidity and fragility all appear across the exploration and combative sections. The fact the world is so relatively, in fact, interactive just adds more to the fun as you destroy offices or smash down bridges through your crusade to save them, one back fist or hammer throw at a time. And this brings us to the final section of performance, and the one that needs the most work. Now, although the game sports 30 FPS modes on both, only the Pro can unlock to 60, with unlock being the key here. Starting with the PS4, it is clear that dynamic resolution construction does appear to resolve many areas that could be much worse, but that doesn't mean problems don't arise. The first thing let's cover is the input latency. So the overall average on the 30 FPS mode on the Pro and obviously the 30 FPS mode on the PS4, it comes out at 130 milliseconds. That's its best time. The average overall is 144.9. So it's not a great performing 30 FPS title, and obviously with dips that's only going to get worse. But the 60 FPS mode, which I'll touch on in a moment, does open up a great deal of improvements to this, and one of those is the fact that it can improve that by up to 60 milliseconds. The best now drops down to 63.7, but the average, more likely than not, is 84.5. Like I say, 60 milliseconds faster than it was on the PS4, and the 30 FPS mode is welcome and certainly beneficial. And it's needed because the consistency of performance on all modes is not there. It is a beta and all of these look like areas they could refine on. Generally they're not all GPU related. I certainly wouldn't say they're CPU related. In fact, most of the issues I'm seeing here come down to things like streaming in textures, assets, cache issues, code issues overall, just glitchy areas where code's moving from a combat section to load in another section of a dynamic cinematic and then back again, or entering new areas as you trigger sector point. Like many modern games now, they reserve a portion of hard drive space as part of the installation, most likely to generate their shaders at runtime when the game kicks off, and then use that as a temporal buffer to move data in and out so it's addressable and used by the engine. But obviously there's areas here of refinement when you're constantly juggling memory like you would in these consoles, even on the Pro, which is memory starved, based on its actual output image that it targets 4K. Then this gives the game issues in terms of loading textures in and out, using the caches and all those kind of areas which consistently impact games overall. And that means that in a few months time when this launches, or at least next month, this is probably going to be a couple of months old, that means the game might have these areas refined and smoothed out, so you'll see less of these dips, these long 100 millisecond spikes that you get on all versions, on all sections, when you're loading in and out sections or hitting triggering points. or moving from the real-time cinematic as it tries to stream data for the next level in the background while it's playing it. All of those issues cause a lot of the dips we see, but there are general GPU dips here as well. As you can see here on the PS4, some later sections of the game like this really get heavy, and you can get the game down to the high teens at times, as you've already seen just in combat alone. And this can affect all versions, and this includes that 60 FPS mode that's available on the Pro. So there is a level of consistency here that's actually better, with I believe the 4K mode being the most consistent version to play, because you don't get these heavy dips. Like you say, that's that spot just then. That's a loading section that's causing that buffer. RAM allocation, it's jittering into those mid-20s and keeping that frame time around the 50-60 milliseconds. That's causing that dip, but it's not generally GPU bound all the time. It could also be the fact that the dynamic resolution is not kicking in quite aggressive enough, and they need to ramp that up, or at least give it a little bit more time to hold that resolution at a lower buffer level just to get that performance back to where it needs to be. This means that the PS4 can suffer heavily in combat sections like this and other sections later on in the title that can cause it to feel inconsistent, and that's where that input time comes into it. And that's why the 60 FPS mode, even though it's not excellent and I wouldn't recommend it as a way to play, I liked unlocked frame rate, but this is too inconsistent for me overall in combat to feel that solid. It certainly needs some work, and I'm sure it will get some nearer launch. And obviously the Xbox, the Series X and the PS5 will offer a 4K 60 mode, and I'm pretty sure that will be as close to locked as you can get. Depends how much they add to the additional elements in terms of textures and details. But the input time at the 60 FPS mode is beneficial. So like I say, it's 60 milliseconds quicker, which you can feel. But even when it's running at 30 FPS, it's still faster, because overall there's less going on through the pipeline, so you get slightly higher poll rates, and therefore you can feel that improvement in the input times even at 30 FPS. Overall, my recommended mode is the Pro on the 4K mode. It still dips, it still has dips into the 20s, pretty much similar to what the PS4 version is in fact, but you get slightly better consistency on input times because it's not quite as bad as the PS4, very minor but it isn't. And overall the image quality is very sharp, very clean, and it looks better on a 1080p and a 4K screen. Overall, I'm very impressed with what Crystal Dynamics Eidos Montreal have pulled together here. It's a very flamboyant game. It certainly fits in with the Marvel universe, and it has some excellent visual effects, superb character models, and overall it's a solid game that plays that single player journey through the Marvel universe very well indeed. Personally, it's not my cup of tea, it's not the game I would love to play, and a lot of what you've seen here is my son playing it, who's a bigger fan of it than I am, and that's obviously understandable. That's the market it's aimed for, including that crossover it's got within this beta itself for a Fortnite option at the end. So I'm sure it's going to sell gangbusters, irrespective of all the details I've covered here. And I will be looking at the Xbox and PC versions when I get my hands on that next week. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this in-depth look at the game, the engine, and just how well it runs across all formats and versions that we've got access to so far. And as always, I'd like to stress that I am completely self-funded and independent, and I do this as a part-time gig. So you can help immensely by sharing, commenting, liking, and obviously hitting that bell and that subscription button to be notified of new videos as I put them up. I can't stress how much all of those things mean to me, and if you can, also check out my Patreon site, which you can see all the supporters on screen now that pay for that video name in the credits option. I do want to thank each and every one of those that really help support me, and all of the other patrons that can support me with lower amounts. I'm not asking for a fortune, whatever you can afford, and only if you can afford. It really helps me improve my quality, my camera work, my capture card, and my setup, so I can deliver more and actually give you more information sooner than I do at the moment. Anyway, that's it. I've waffled on enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and please stick around for a few more minutes of footage of the 60 FPS mode just to get an idea of what I've been talking about. And if you do like this, you know what to do. I'll see you on the next one.
Avengers, talk to me.
Those tanks are doing a number on the bridge. They could fall if we don't take them out.
more of this!
I'm trying!
Carlton! Carlton! Avengers, do you read? What's happening out there? Avengers, report!
Shepard in my sight!
Shepard!
Avengers, if you can hear me, the convoy is transporting a highly lethal sonic disruptor bomb. Our enemies intend to detonate it within the city.
We're going down.
I'm kicking your ass!
The base of the bridge is secure.
Guys, I'm getting these strange seismic readings.
Truck!
Got it.
There's a path up through the research lab. You have to bust through the server room.
This isn't you. This monster isn't you, Doctor. He wouldn't want this research destroyed. I can help you.
Yeah, right.
Let me help you, Bruce. It isn't too late. The Hulk! You saw the truth, Banner. You were the only one. We're fixing the damage the Avengers did, what we did all those years ago. There is a chance for all those Inhumans to have a better life. We can still save the Inhumans from your fate. They want a cure.
He's lying. He's not saving anyone.
I wish it didn't have to come to this.